Dear students, after a gap of time, we shall be talking about the fish health and importance of fish health in aquaculture. Why it is important to study fish health and why it is important to know about the diseases which are detrimental to the fish health. So, in this lecture, we shall be restricting ourselves to the importance of fish health and its management in aquaculture. And then we shall be moving on to different diseases which occur in fishes. First of all, we shall be talking about fish health as a constraint in aquaculture. The current trend in aquaculture development is towards increased intensification. So it is towards increased intensification and commercialization of aquatic production. And like all other farming sectors, the likelihood of the major disease problems occurring increases as the aquaculture activities intensify and expand. So with the intensification and expansion of the aquaculture activities, the diseases also increase. So thus, aquaculture industry has been overwhelmed with the share of diseases and problems caused by viruses, bacteria, fungi, parasites, and other undiagnosed and emerging pathogens. So disease is now a primary constraint to the culture of many aquatic species, impeding both economic and social development in many countries. So this situation can be attributed to a variety of multifaceted and highly interconnected factors, such as increased globalization of trade in living aquatic animals and their products, the intensification of aquaculture through the translocation of broodstock, post-larvae, fry, and fingerlings, the development and expansion of ornamental fish trade, the enhancement of marine coastal areas through stocking aquatic animals raised in hatcheries, and the misunderstanding and the misuse of specific pathogen-free stocks. For example, in the case of shrimps, unanticipated negative interaction between cultured and wild fish populations, poor or the lack of effective biosecurity measures, and the slow awareness programs or the slow awareness on the emerging diseases. And last but not the least, the climate change and all those other human mediated movements of the aquaculture commodities. This has led to the constraint in the fish health. Now, when we talk about the fish disease, when we say disease, disease is a fact of life in all animal populations. It is not only the fish, but even including human beings, animals, and all those who are alive, who are living. So the disease is a fact of life in all animal populations and production system on land and in water. So when finfish aquaculture operations or in the marine environment, water moves freely between farms and the oceans. So what does it mean? It means the infected water having different kinds of pathogen that can get mixed and that can even infect other water bodies as well. So the risks include amplification and transmission of disease from farm to wild fish and the introduction of non-native pathogens and parasites when fish are transported. So when we talk about the disease in the case of fishes, it is mostly the free movement of the water which leads to the transmission of the disease, and even the diseases from the wild to the farmed fish, and even the introduction of the non-native pathogens and parasites when the fish are transported from one place to another. So fish disease occur naturally in wild, but their effects often undergo unnoticed because dead fish quickly become prey. So when we talk about this very fish disease in nature, we hardly find the diseased fishes in nature. Now what happens? Because there is the competition. Even the fish which is a diseased one, which is slow one, that becomes easy prey for its predator, which are abundant in nature. So we are unable to find, or there are very less number of the diseased fish found in nature. So this is one of the reasons. And disease events can occur in the fish farms because, now what are those reasons why do we find more diseases in farmed fishes? The first important factor is that fish are reared at higher densities than nature and increasing contact between the fish. So number one, it is the density which is higher in the case of the farmed fishes, and secondly, there is a close contact between the fishes. So it means more denser the fishes, more the contact and more transmission of the disease. So infected fish are not removed as promptly from the farm as they would be by natural predators. So in the case of wild, whenever the fish is symptomatic, whenever fish is dull, when the fish is sick, it is easily eaten by its predator, which are prevalent in the case of wild environment. But having no predator in the case of in the farmed fishes, so there is not the prompt removal of these very fishes that leads to the passage of the disease from one individual to another. Thirdly, the farmed fish are more closely and easily observed. And secondly, when I talk that these very farmed fish are more closely and easily observed than wild fish. Thus, pathogens that normally exist in low numbers and do not cause disease in wild may result in disease in farmed fish. So most of the pathogens which normally exist in low numbers in the wild environment, but due to the closeness, high density, they get transmitted easily in the farmed fishes. Now, what is the role of the fish health in aquaculture? When we talk about the fish, nowadays, we all know that the fish has an enormous value as the most frequent source of animal protein for major part of the humans, especially in the countries during rapid development in Asia and Africa. All fish species are part of the local ecology, as such has a biological and environmental importance. So, and also when we talk about the fish, it is not only the source of the protein, source of the you can say a part of the local ecology, but apart from these, the fish give great pleasure to the sport fishermen around the world, and at the same time it contributes to the local economy. It means it is acting as a sport fishery along with the generation of the income and thus creation of the sports tourism. In fact, in spite of this, the fish receive very little attention in consideration to diseases and health production and protection, especially in regard to the wild populations. So these populations are often very vulnerable, and promote sustainability. It is of utmost importance to take active actions and promote international regulations for the restriction of the fisheries. So we should be prompt enough to have certain kind of the regulations so that diseases can be prevented from being spread. And fish, it is a difficult group to handle. Why? When we talk about the welfare of these very fishes, it is a very difficult group to handle as diseases and the in terms of diseases and the health protection. So there are various reasons for this. And what are those very reasons which make it the difficult for us to handle diseases in case of the fish? Now, the first important point is that fish lives in water, and water is an excellent medium to transfer pathogens from one area to another, which contributes to the fast uncontrolled transmission of infectious diseases. The first important point is that they live in water, and which acts as an excellent medium to transfer the pathogens. The second important point is that it is difficult to recognize the clinical signs of the disease in fish. Now, why it is difficult to recognize the clinical signs? Now, we are much aware. We shall be talking about these very clinical symptoms in our coming lectures. But why it is difficult in terms of when we compare the fish with other organisms or other animals? The first important thing is that it lives in water and it becomes difficult for us to notice all the fishes if they are not coming up on the water and at the surface. If they are not at the surface, we are unable to know that what is going on with the fish. The second important thing is that fish also lack mimic. What does it mean? It means the fish has no voice or recognizable body language. For example, in the case of other animals, they have the different, you can say, sounds, sighing sounds, or the distress sounds, by which we can know, okay, the goat is in stress, or the horse is in stress, or the cow is in stress, by the sounds they produce. But in the case of fishes, they are unable to produce the sound, and that is why it is very much difficult to recognize the clinical signs, and which gives a late discovery of the disease. So we are late in assessing, in having an idea that through what kind of disease the fish is going on. So which gives a late discovery of the disease and restrain a fast starting up of the treatment. So the treatment which should be given at earliest, that gets late. And third important is that vertically transferred diseases have been described in all vertebrate classes, which means that, now, what are these very vertically transmitted diseases? When we say when the diseases are transferred from the parents to the offspring, this is the vertical transmission. So in all vertebrate classes, which means that the offspring from the infected females are born with the pathogen in their bodies. That is, the offsprings which are born, or the eggs which are laid by unhealthy female, they are likely to be unhealthy. And second important thing is that it is not like other organism which is giving birth to one or two individuals or six individuals or 10 individuals, but fish lays eggs in thousands, in hundreds, in lakhs, in millions. So the fish fecundity is high as compared to other classes of the vertebrates, and thus leading to a single infected female may deliver several thousands of the infected eggs. So thus giving rise to the large number of the infected eggs. So when we talk about the feral fishes, so feral fishes are the wild fishes which live in the vicinity of the farmed fish. So consequently, it is unavoidable that the two groups share the infectious agents with each other. So now we have the common source of the water. We have the ponds near the vicinity of the large water bodies. So many times it becomes difficult to control the movement of the fishes from the wild to the controlled environment. So that is why this also happens to be one of the modes of the transmission of the diseases from the feral fishes to the farmed fishes. And farmed fishes are often kept during the extreme conditions with high population densities and not completely optimized environment. So I was talking about this earlier as well, that the high density without proper care, that will be disastrous in terms of the management of the fishes. And this situation which promote options for the pathogens to infect farmed fish, which thereby can constitute a reservoir for further spreading of the diseases. And there are certain fishes and other animals which act as the biological packages, which means that they share the habitat with our organisms. So it means that one of the fish which is very much infected, having different kind of the pathogens, suffering from the disease and having different kinds of pathogens, is moving freely. If it is moving freely in a farm, in a pond, that may be disastrous in terms of the transmission of the disease from the one fish to whole of the stock. And thirdly, when we talk about a feral fish population, it is impossible to treat diseases without very significant negative impact on the environment. So if we are planning to treat the diseases in the wild environment, it is almost impossible, or we can say it is very much difficult without having its impact on the environment. So if we want to control the disease in the wild environment or the wild or the nature, but it cannot be done without the negative impact on the environment. So that is why this is one of the constraint as well in the aquaculture. Now, what are the factors which have contributed to the different disease problems? There are various factors that have contributed to the current disease problems faced by what is now the fastest growing food producing sector globally. Now we call the fisheries as the aquaculture. Now aquaculture is treated as an industry. It is equivalent to industry. It is an industrial sector now, which is producing and the growing food at a much faster rate, and that too having the high protein content to feed the hungry mouths with the balanced, you can say, nutrition. So there are various factors which contributed to the current disease problems. Now, what are those very factors? Now, the important factors I told you earlier as well, but we shall be repeating it again, that it is the increased globalization of trade and markets, intensification of fish farming practices through the movement of the broodstock, post larvae, fry and fingerlings, and introduction of the new species for aquaculture development, and expansion of the ornamental fish trade. And many a times what we do when we transfer or when we import or when we export the fishes from the one country to another country, and if that very stock is diseased, that will lead to the transmission of the disease to the local fishes as well. And thirdly, enhancement of the marine coastal areas through the stocking of the aquatic animals raised in hatcheries, unanticipated interaction between cultured and the wild population. We have talked about this earlier, that is why I am going fast here. Poor and the lack of effective biosecurity measures, slow awareness and emerging diseases, misunderstanding and misuse of specific pathogen free stocks, and climate change and other human mediated movements of the aquaculture commodities that have led to or contributed to the recent disease problems. Now, what are the management and the remedies? That how we can manage if we are facing the diseases in the case of fishes, that how we are going to manage it. Over the last 2 decades, a number of measures have been developed to effectively control the bacterial diseases in farmed fish. Now, what are those? How we can control these very diseases? Now, we can control them by inclusion, and those very control measures include vaccines, probiotics, limiting culture density. It means we shall not go for the higher density in the case of culturing them in intensive aquacultures, high quality diets, and when appropriate and judicious use of the antibiotics is done, we can manage properly. And secondly, antibiotics are considered as a method of the last resort. Antibiotics are not considered as the first and the foremost resort, but in the western countries or the advanced countries, they are used as a last resort. And uh, and the management of the viruses, it is focused on monitoring for the diseases and maintaining culture conditions that enable healthy fish to resist diseases through the good nutrition, genetics and the stress environments. So we can manage the diseases. And even if we go for the management of the viruses, it is focused on monitoring for the diseases, maintaining culture conditions that enable healthy fish to resist diseases through good nutrition, genetics, and low stress environments. So when viral diseases are discovered, when we discover viral diseases, that very fish must be abruptly or promptly taken out of the pond or taken out of the stock, and it should be segregated. It should be separated from the other fishes. And when we talk about the vaccines for the viral diseases, they are being developed. They are at the verge of the, you can say, success. So the vaccines are being made for the viral diseases, and the successful measures to control the parasites on the farms include therapeutics or the pest management strategies, or those very use of those very varieties which are healthier, which are fast growing, which are healthy, which are disease free. So we are seeing here that many times in some cases the vaccines are being developed, and they are injected in the fish, and then they are introduced back into the stock. And secondly, if we find any kind of symptoms such as viral symptoms in the case of the virus symptoms in the case of the fishes, that very fish should be taken out immediately and separated from the other fishes. Now, what are the principles of the fish health management? The first principle is that we should minimize the stress in cultivated fish. The fishes should be having very less stress in terms of the environmental stress, or that may be in terms of the density, or in terms of the food and the feeding. And secondly, confinement of the disease outbreak to the affected ponds. So we should confine the outbreak of the disease to a particular pond. It should not. We should take appropriate measures that the disease from the one pond may not spread to the other pond. And thirdly, minimizing losses from the disease outbreak. So we should look on the conditions where we can minimize the losses from the disease outbreak. Now, what are the general preventive measures? How we are going to prevent the fish diseases? The first important thing is that we should look for this selection of the healthy fish seeds. It means we should go for the selection of the good brooders who are disease free, who are not having the serious diseases, or they are healthy in condition. So we should select those very brooders which are healthy in condition, and then we should take seeds by method of the induced breeding, or we can get the seeds from the proper certified, government certified hatcheries as well. So we do have the proper density and the rational care. So proper density should be maintained. They should be rationally, you can say, there should be the proper density and the rational culture. We should not increase the density, which can lead to the stress in the case of fishes. Thirdly, we should have the proper pond management. Proper pond management. What does it mean? It means we should be knowing that what kind of species we are going to culture, what kind of the feed we are going to put, what if there are any phytoplanktons and zooplanktons, which we should look for the the algal blooms. Then we should be looking for the qualitatively uniform ratio and the quality food. So the ratio of the different species that should be maintained. The food should be of good quality, having the balanced protein, lipid, carbohydrate, and vitamins ratio. Good water quality. It means that we should be checking the quality of the water time by time, so as to know whether the water is healthy in condition or not. So we should be looking for the water quality by checking and the analysis of the dissolved oxygen, pH, ammonia, carbonate, bicarbonate, then turbidity, total dissolved solids. So these are some of the electrical conductivity. These are some of the important parameters which should be in a favorable range, so that the fish may not get in stress. And the prevention of the body from the injuries. So whenever we are going to handle the fish, handling of the fish is one of the important criteria. That whenever we are going to handle the fish, we should be quite delicate in handling in terms of the brood fishes. Brood fishes are very much delicate to handle, and whenever we are going to net, we are going to take out some fishes, the other fishes should not get injured. So, and there should not be any some of the things in the pond which can injure the fish. Now, what are the sources of the infectious diseases? That how these very infections spread? The infectious sources, they can be primary source, they can be secondary source. So if we talk about the primary source, it is the sick fish. The fish having certain kind of disease that acts as a primary source. And there are other and are the carriers. These are the carriers of the pathogens, and the pathogen infects through the direct contact or by discharge of the disease causing agents in water. So either the fish can infect the other fishes directly, or it can spread through the discharge of the disease causing agents in water. And secondary source is water that is coming from the diseased ponds. For example, if this pond is diseased and the same water is being circulated to the other pond, and this very pond moves on to other pond, this water moves to other ponds. So the secondary source is the water which is coming from the diseased ponds to the diseased ponds and having the contaminated silt, feeds and gears. So that can act as a secondary source. Now, one and the last important thing is that despite various measures we have to look for in terms of the quality culture of the fishes, the fish itself has an immune system or the defensive mechanism by which fish can resist to different infectious diseases. For example, when we talk about the natural resistance of the fish to infectious diseases, the surface texture of the skin is an important one, and the mucous membrane which which secretes the mucus, and it keeps the infectious organisms out of it. So one of the important part is the mucus, and other we call it as the lysozymes secreted from the cells that can also kill the bacteria. So lysozyme also kill the bacteria which are secreted by the cells of the fishes. Then we do have the pathogenic microbes entering into the digestive tract. So if the pathogenic microbes, they enter into the digestive tracts, they come under the influence of the digestive enzymes, such as we do have the peptides, we do have the many times in the stomach, the fishes which are having the stomach, they secrete the HCl. Then there are various protein digesting enzymes which are present in the stomach. They kill the pathogens. Then the phagocytic function of the white blood corpuscles, they play an important role. Lymphoid cells and reticuloendothelial cells of the spleen, liver and blood vessels, they eliminate the foreign body as well as the pathogenic microorganisms. Blood of the fish contains bactericidin, which can eradicate all kinds of pathogenic bacteria. But it is mostly by the weak immune system. Many times the fish get infected, or the infectious agents, they are larger in number in the water, or the water is contaminated. That leads to the infection in the case of fishes. Otherwise, the fish has a natural resistance to the infectious diseases. So there are two important things that we should be knowing before moving on to the fish diseases. That is the transboundary aquatic animal diseases are pathogens. We call it as the TAAD, TARD, or TAAP, TAP. Transboundary aquatic animal diseases, it is TARD, and transboundary aquatic animal pathogens, we call it as the TAP. So but what do we mean by the transboundary diseases? So aquaculture is faced with what is known as the transboundary aquatic animal pathogens or diseases. These very TAPs or TARDs are similar to transboundary animal diseases, which we call it as the TARDs, TADS, transboundary animal disease, simple animal diseases, which we call them in the live sector, that is the cattles or the livestock. So TARDs are the diseases that are highly contagious or transmissible, having potential for very rapid spread, irrespective of the national borders, and causing serious socio-economic and possibly health consequences. So those very diseases which are highly contagious, transmissible, or they have the potential for very rapid spread, irrespective of the national borders, they have nothing to do with the water borders, because water does not know the boundaries. They can spread to the different water bodies and they can create panic. The Office International Death Episodes, we call it as OIE. It currently lists 35 pathogen diseases of the finfish, mollusk, crustaceans that fit three criteria. Now, what are those very criteria which, on the basis of which we can declare that this disease is a TARD? Now, what are those? The first occurrence or reoccurrence of a disease in a country or a zone of a country, if the country or zone was previously to be free of that very particular disease. So the disease which was not present in that very country, but it is now occurring and reoccurring in a particular country which was previously free from that very disease. Now it can be considered as a TARD. Or occurrence in the new host species or new host, it was not prevalent in a particular host, but now this very host is also this is also infected with that very host, that very disease. We can also categorize it as a transboundary aquatic animal disease or pathogen, or a new pathogen strain, or a new disease manifestation, or a new variety of the disease. New kind of pathogen has invaded the boundary, or potential for the international spread of the disease, or a particular disease which has the potential to spread at a very fast rate to different parts of the world, or has the zoonotic potential. So these very criteria, on these very criteria, we can declare the diseases as a transboundary or TARDs or TOPs. Infectious diseases are constraining the development and sustainability of the aquaculture sector through direct production losses and increased operating costs, and indirectly through the restrictions on trade and impacts on biodiversity. So inadequate or poorly implemented biosecurity measures have led to significant losses due to aquatic animal diseases in many countries around the world. The impact of the aquatic animal diseases on wild populations and biodiversity can be measured in terms of. Now, what are those very measures on the basis of which the impact can be measured? Impact on the aquatic community structure through changes in predator-prey populations, changes in the host abundance, that is through altered genetic demands, altered host behavior, increased mortality, decreased fecundity, increased susceptibility to predation, that can be highly having an impact of that can be an impact of the transboundary disease. Reduction of the intraspecific genetic variation, local extirpation of susceptible components of aquatic communities, that can be categorized as an impact of the transboundary disease or the possible extinction of the species. So there are various impacts of the very grave impacts of the transboundary diseases, that rightly from the changes in the predator and prey populations to the changes in the host abundance to reduction in the intraspecific genetic variation to local extirpation of the susceptible components of the aquatic communities and even the extinction of the species. So it has a grave impact. So this was all about the introduction to the animal health, aquatic animal health, or the health management in the case of fish. Next time we shall be dealing with the fish diseases. We shall be introducing having an introduction to the different kinds of the viral diseases in fishes, bacterial, fungal, protozoan, and then miscellaneous diseases in the case of the fishes in the coming lectures. Thank you very much.